Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I am here today to do a book haul for the month of April. I had held off on doing my book haul for April because I wanted to wait until after Independent Bookstore Day, which, if you're watching this as it is posted, was this past Saturday, and now I'm filming this on Monday. Here's a funny thing that happened, though. I didn't actually buy any books on Independent Bookstore Day. I mean, we did buy stuff, but we bought like greeting cards. We did buy a book for our niece and gift things like that. And this fun little puzzle, it's 150 pieces. There are tiny little puzzle pieces in it. I don't know if you can see, but it is a puzzle of the exterior of Montana Book Company, which is going to be really fun. We haven't put it together yet, but I think I might just keep it together and maybe even frame it. I think it would be really cute. It's a small puzzle. It's about, this big once it's put together. So it just should be a fun thing. But so I didn't end up buying any books on Independent Bookstore Day. I got a puzzle, got some greeting cards and gifts. It is what it is. But I had a great time on Independent Bookstore Day, and I hope you did as well. If you celebrate, it's a great holiday. I am wearing my sweatshirt from Raven Books in Kansas today, because it is cold where I live, and this is a cozy sweatshirt. So that's what's going on. I actually only have 4 books to talk to you about this month. Part of that is because, a big part of that is because Joel and I have been sort of saving because we're going to be going on vacation in May. So it's smaller, but also I have been trying to really put into effect some of the practices from my book haul revisits, where I look at previous book hauls and see how many of the books I have read. I'm trying to be much more intentional about books that I purchase. And hopefully that does actually mean my book hauls will be getting smaller. I recently got a complaint that some of my videos are about 30 minutes or longer, and they would like them to be shorter. So who knows? If you're somebody who likes shorter videos, maybe this will be a shorter one. I can't make any promises because I don't know if you've noticed, I like to talk. So anyway, let's dive into these 4 books. I am really excited about all of them. None of them are new books, which is interesting as well. Anyway, the first one is The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. My local used bookstore had this hardcover of it that's in really good condition. I think it's actually even a first edition of it. It is. And I've kind of been holding off on purchasing copies of this because they tend to be everywhere. But what really lured me into this is the fact that it is a first edition. And I think I have now officially locked myself into hardcovers of Anne Patchett's books completely by accident, because I have 4 of her books now, and all of them are hardcovers. Tom Lake, obviously because it's new and it is only available in hardcover at the moment, but then my local used bookstore had copies of Commonwealth and State of Wonder, and they're all hardcovers. So I feel like I might have to lean into looking for them in hardcover whenever I want to purchase one of her books. It'll probably be fine if I don't, though. I have Louise Erdrich's books in hardcover and paperback, and, that will end up happening. But right now, I've got a theme going. So we'll see how long it lasts. Anyway, The Dutch House was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction, and ultimately, obviously did not win. But it is a book that a lot of people it feels like there's a bit of cilantro sentiment about this. Some people like it, some people just don't like it at all. So it will be interesting to see where I end up on this when I do get around to it. I feel like I'm more likely to read Commonwealth first, and then possibly State of Wonder, because I've heard a lot of really great things about both Commonwealth and State of Wonder. And because this one is a little mixed, I feel like I might wait. However, because it has that Pulitzer connection, I am really interested in this one. I think Tom Hanks reads the audio, but I might try to read it in print, because oddly, I've heard really mixed things about his reading of the audio of The Dutch House, whereas Meryl Streep's performance of Tom Lake seems pretty universally loved. So let's see what this book is about. At the end of the Second World War, Cyril Conroy combines luck and a single canny investment to build an immense real estate empire, propelling his family from poverty to enormous wealth. His first order of business is to buy the Dutch House, a lavish estate in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Meant as a surprise for his wife, the house sets in motion the undoing of everyone he loves. The story is told by Cyril's son, Danny, as he and his older sister, the brilliantly acerbic and self-assured Maeve, are exiled by their stepmother from the house where they grew up. The two wealthy siblings are thrown back into the poverty their parents had escaped from and find that all they have to count on is each other. It is this unshakable bond that both saves their lives and thwarts their futures. Set over the course of 5 decades, The Dutch House is a dark fairy tale about two smart people who cannot overcome their past. Despite every outward sign of success, Danny and Maeve are only truly comfortable when they're together. Throughout their lives, they return to the well-worn narrative of what they've lost with humor and rage. But when at last they're forced to confront the people who left them behind, the relationship between an indulged brother and his ever-protective sister is finally tested. The Dutch House is a story of a paradise lost, a tour de force that digs deeply into questions of inheritance, love, forgiveness, how we want to see ourselves, and who we really are. It is filled with suspense, and though you may read it quickly to discover what happens, Danny and Maeve will stay with you for a very long time. That's what this book is about. Again, I am willing to go all in on Ann Patchett because although I've only read 2 of her books right now, and one of them was Run, which I did not like, but I really love Tom Lake. She is actually my prediction for the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction, which will be announced 1 week from the day that I'm filming this video. So we'll see if that ultimately comes true. But I really enjoyed Tom Lake, and because I also really enjoy her social media presence on her bookstore Parnassus's Instagram account, I've basically gone all in, and hopefully I will continue liking her books, and The Dutch House will continue the trend of Tom Lake. I like to read a bit from the beginning of books that I haul, so let's go to Part 1, Chapter 1. The first time our father brought Andrea to the Dutch House, Sandy, our housekeeper, came to my sister's room and told us to come downstairs. Your father has a friend he wants you to meet, she said. Is it a work friend? Maeve asked. She was older and so had a more complex understanding of friendship. Sandy considered the question. I'd say not. Where's your brother? Window seat, Maeve said. Sandy had to pull the draperies back to find me. Why do you have to close the drapes? I was reading. Privacy, I said, though at 8 I had no notion of privacy. I liked the word, and I liked the boxed-in feel the draperies gave when they were closed. That is the opening of Ann Patchett's Pulitzer Prize finalist novel, The Dutch House, in this beautiful hardcover first edition. Now, this has an Ann Patchett connection, but it is not by Ann Patchett. It's Family Happiness by Laurie Coleman. So I mentioned that I enjoy Ann Patchett's presence on the social media accounts for her bookstore Parnassus. She really takes part in 2 different videos every week unless she's traveling. And one is the Laydown Diaries. Every Tuesday they talk about the new releases. And on Friday she does a video series called If You Haven't Read This, It's New to You, where she talks about backlist titles. And in one of those, she talked about I don't remember if it was exactly Family Happiness that she spoke about, but she talked about Laurie Coleman. And I think it was Family Happiness that she talked about, but it was definitely Laurie Coleman. So ever since then, I have been watching for Laurie Coleman books at my local used bookstore. They did get one, but it was a tiny little paperback from the 1980s, seemed a little flimsy to the point where it only cost $1, and that does make it a little bit tempting to just grab it because it's $1. However, I did look it up and it got a pretty negative review on Kirkus, but they had a very positive review for this one. So I decided to wait, and patience paid off because eventually they got this copy of Family Happiness. This, I believe, is what the original cover of the book and paperback looked like. There are newer editions with very pretty, more modern looking covers that you could find available now. If you're going through a used bookstore, you really get what, beggars can't be choosers, I guess is what I'm saying. I forgot to mention who published The Dutch House. It's Harper. And this edition of Family Happiness is published by Perennial Library, which I believe is a division of Harper. So look at that. We have another little connection. Yeah, Harper and Row Publishers. So anyway, here is what this is about. In Family Happiness, Laurie Coleman tells the story of Polly, a happy wife and mother from a remarkably strong and attractive family, who one day finds herself embarked on a completely unexpected, sweet and painful love affair with a painter named Lincoln Bennett. All of Polly's beliefs about herself and the rightness of her life are exploded, uprooting what had seemed to be a settled and everlasting idea of family happiness. And what do you know? We have a title right there. I love it. I love it when everything comes together. And from that description, this is the book that Ann Patchett talked about in her video. If you haven't read this, it's new to you. And if I remember correctly, because it's been a couple of months at this point, what she said at the time was that when she started this book, she thought she knew where it was going, and she really did not. And even the parts where she was correct about where it was going meant that it really just had quite an impact on her as a reader. So here is this book at last. I believe it was published in the early 80s, and then Laurie Colwin passed away somewhere around 1990. So she's an author that I will be glad to catch up to and discover, and who knows, maybe can help other people find as well. Yes, this is copyright 1982. So this book is as old as I am. We go to part 1, chapter 1. Polly Solo Miller Demarest was the perfect flower of the Solo Miller family. This family had everything: looks, brains, money, a strong, fortified sense of clan, and branches in Boston, Philadelphia, and New York, as well as London, just like a banking house. The patriarch of the New York gang was Henry Solo Miller, husband of the former Constantia Hendricks, nicknamed Wendy. Both were of old Jewish families, the sort that are more identifiably old American than Jewish. Solo Millers and Hendrickses had come from Holland via Spain before the American Revolution, which they had either taken part in or helped to raise money for. Henry and Wendy had 3 children: Paul, Dora, called Polly by everyone, and Henry Jr. We will leave it at that. The beginning of Family Happiness by Laurie Colwin. I feel like the writing in that opening paragraph does actually kind of remind me of Ann Patchett, which is interesting because I think she had only read Family Happiness recently when she did that video. I can see why she likes it, because the writing feels a bit similar. Not in a bad way, in a good way. I'm really interested in that book as well, in case you can't tell, since I got a copy of it. Now, in September, The Light Changes, the stories of Andrew Holleran. Andrew Holleran wrote the queer classic Dancer from the Dance, which was published in the 1970s and is really about the sort of queer underground life in New York. It's like a time capsule to the way it would have been for a segment of the population to exist as a gay man in New York City at the time and have a lot of anonymous sex, and how it would feel to have the notion of romance or sustained relationships cut off from you because society didn't really want you to have those things. It's a fascinating, prickly book, and I love it. It's a gay classic. So Andrew Holleran recently wrote a different book that I still see all of the genius, but I didn't think it was anywhere near as successful, but I'm still intrigued by the writing of Andrew Holleran. This was in my local used bookstore, and I just had to pick it up because I don't know when I had never heard of this book in particular, and it was just a good find to stumble on something by Andrew Holleran, who again is a queer classic author. So I really couldn't pass up the opportunity to take it home. This edition is published by Plume, and here is what it says on the back. In September, The Light Changes features a cast of unforgettable characters in settings as widely varied as Mexico, Amsterdam, Key West, Iowa, Manhattan, and Fire Island at summer's end. By turns pensive and passionate, hilarious and heartbreaking, Holleran's men are outsiders, given to autumnal reminiscences and melancholy, yet also possessed of a livening, wicked wit. Sunday morning, Key West finds the narrator adrift in a haze of memories, of sexy drifters and sunsets heavy with metaphor, of lonely youth and encroaching middle age, of tragic death and new beginnings. Blortz introduces a man whose massive pectoral muscles are only a superficial mirror for his greater interior longings. And in Petunias, a restaurant manager, returning to an island full of ghosts, feels the stirrings of love for the first time in years. Combining an acuteness of social vision with lush, elegant prose, In September the Light Changes is Andrew Holleran at his most lyrical and moving, erotic, and profound. I'm actually curious about what year this was published, because they mention An Island of Ghosts, which makes me, I'm not going to look at the copyright date yet. It makes me kind of wonder if this was published post the AIDS epidemic or during the AIDS epidemic, because Dancer from the Dance was before. So it's sort of a time capsule of what queer life was like when the underground in New York built up, but before the AIDS epidemic changed a lot of those dynamics. So this is published, it's copyright 1999, so it would be after. And I guess that could tie into the idea of an island full of ghosts. Now, it's a bit different to read from the opening of a story collection, but usually what I do when that happens in a book haul is I just read a little bit from the opening story of the collection. The first story in this collection is called The Ossuary, and here is how it begins. Leaving Mexico for Oaxaca, we got lost, circling for over an hour, a neighborhood near the airport because we were confusing, we realized after stopping to ask directions for the 5th time, the word derecho, straight ahead, with derecha, to the right. You see the importance of words, said Mr. O'Connell. Finally, a beautiful woman, seeing us go by her window yet again, like clothes in a dryer, took pity on us, ran out to our car, and told us to look for the sign that said Pueblo Coata. And after giving her the carnations we'd bought outside a church, we found the highway to Oaxaca while Mr. O'Connell sat in the back seat crying, that was an angel. Literally an angel of God. And that is how the first story of In September, the Light Changes by Andrew Holleran opens. The final book I got is something I actually did pick up on Independent Bookstore Day, but I didn't purchase it. So when you made a purchase at Montana Book Company for Independent Bookstore Day, you could look through a library cart full of advanced readers copies that they had and pick one out. And I almost said no, but when I was glancing through, I saw this. Little Eyes by Samantha Schweblin. It's an ARC of it. So I am sort of on a roller coaster with Samantha Schweblin. I have read Fever Dream, which is the one they mention at the bottom. And that one I like. I want to mention the translator, but before I move on and forget, but it is not on the cover. It's translated by Megan McDowell. So Fever Dream is a wild book. I'm not entirely sure I understand everything that happened in it, and yet I am fascinated by it. I find it captivating and interesting, and I recommend it a fair amount of the time. You may have heard me talk about it. It's been a while since I talked about it, but it is something that I, especially in the years after I first read it, I was really high on, even though, again, I feel like I'm not quite sure if I understand everything that happened in it. Like its title, it feels like a fever dream, and it's just so beautiful and wonderful and dark and creepy and unsettling and all of those things. Samantha Schweblin also released a story collection called Mouthful of Birds, and that one was less successful for me. So I've kind of held off on subsequent books that were published by Samantha Schweblin, but how do I say no to a free advanced reader's copy of this one, which came out and did sound really interesting. I just never got a copy for myself, never sought it out on audio, so maybe this will encourage me to get back to Samantha Schweblin and see if this is more Fever Dream and less Mouthful of Birds. I think the story format didn't quite work for her style of writing, for me at least, in the way that a novella like Fever Dream did. I feel like it needed a little more room to develop the sort of creepiness like Fever Dream did. But anyway, this is the novel. Here's what it says on the back of the book. A visionary novel about our interconnected present, about the collision of horror and humanity from a master of the spine-tingling tale. They've infiltrated homes in Hong Kong, shops in Vancouver, the streets of Sierra Leone, town squares of Oaxaca, schools in Tel Aviv, bedrooms in Indiana. They're everywhere. They're here, they're us. They're not pets or ghosts or robots. They're real people. But how can a person living in Berlin walk freely through the living room of someone in Sydney? How can someone in Bangkok have breakfast with your children in Buenos Aires without your knowing? Especially when these people are completely anonymous, unknown, unfindable. The characters in Samantha Schweblin's brilliant new novel, Little Eyes, revealed the beauty of connection between far-flung souls, but they also expose the ugly side of our increasingly linked world. Trusting strangers can lead to unexpected love, playful encounters, and marvelous adventure, but what happens when it can also pave the way for unimaginable terror? This is a story that is already happening. It's familiar and unsettling because it's our present and we're living it. We just don't know it yet. In this prophecy of a story, Schweblin creates a dark and complex world that's somehow so sensible, so familiar, that once it's entered, no one can ever leave. Interesting. So this is published by Riverhead Books, and I don't have any immediate plans to read any of these books, actually. I feel like if you told me you have to pick one of these books to read within the next month, I probably actually would go with Family Happiness, but part of that is because I feel like I want to read Commonwealth or possibly even State of Wonder before I get to the Dutch House. So Family Happiness is probably the one of these 4 books that I would prioritize first, but I don't have immediate plans to get to it. Maybe I'll manage to get to it before the end of 2024. Maybe I won't. These are mostly library builders, things that I would like to have in my library because I would like to read them at some point and I find them interesting and all of that. And this, of the 4, is probably the one that I would be least likely to get to anytime soon, but we'll see how that goes. In about a year, I will have a book haul revisit and we'll see if I have gotten to any of these 4 books. Here is how Little Eyes opens. The first chapter is called South Bend, and I am going to paraphrase the first sentence because it involves a slang word for boobs. Let's just say that. The first thing they did was show their boobs. The 3 of them sat on the edge of the bed facing the camera, took off their shirts, and one by one removed their bras. Robin had almost nothing to show, but she did it anyway, paying more attention to the looks she got from Katya and Amy than to the game itself. If you want to survive in South Bend, she'd heard the girls say once, you have to make friends with the strong. And that is how Little Eyes by Samantha Schweblin opens. I'm trying to remember when this was published. I think it was about a year or 2 ago. So it's copyright 2020. That's the translation by Megan McDowell. And it says that this will be on sale May 5th, 2020. So it's been 4 years since this was released. If you have read it or any of the other books, I would love to get your feedback. Let me know what you thought of them in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.